Welcome to another ABC University training session. In this training session, we're going to talk about using a DVOM or a digital volt ohm meter. The digital volt ohm meter can sometimes be called a DMM, digital multimeter, or a multimeter. There are different manufacturers for all types of multimeters. The one we're going to use in this training session is going to be the Fluke 73. In this training series, we're going to get to know your multimeter. We'll also go over what your settings are and what the different symbols mean, and when to use them. And we'll also go over where do the leads go on the meter with the circuit you are checking. In this picture, this is going to show you how your leads go for when you're checking volts, ohms, and a diode check. With your multimeter, we can do some voltage tests. First being test for available voltage. We can check for polarity. You can hook across or parallel the device or circuit being tested. You can do a test for voltage drop, loss or voltage in a circuit, and you can also adjust to the most accurate range for any of your tests. In this picture, we give you an example of how to test for available voltage. Now let's go over our first setting on the multimeter, which is for AC voltage. The icon on the multimeter will be a V with a squiggly line on top. AC voltage is alternating current, 110 positive to 110 negative. Your AC voltage setting on the multimeter is used to measure household voltage. And again, the voltage that you're actually checking for is 110 to 220 volts and up. And AC voltage does have some automotive applications. For instance, on the coach, we could use it to check our plug-in receptacles that we use for 110 power. The next setting on our multimeter is going to be for DC volts, and the icon for that would be a V with a straight line with some dashes underneath it. DC volts is a definition of its direct current voltage. This setting will be used to measure most coach circuits for trying to find voltage. And when you're on this setting, you're actually measuring between 12 and 24 volts. Now we're going to talk about the ohm setting. The ohm setting is the symbol that looks like the omega sign. Ohms is used to measure the resistance in the circuit. When checking resistance or in the ohm scale, you must disconnect the item from the battery. When checking ohms, you'll actually use the battery from the meter to get your readings. And when checking in ohms, you want to make sure you look for the M or the K in the display. M will equal mega ohms and K will equal kilo ohms. In this example, we show you how to check any component and check the resistance by using your volt ohm meter. Again, disconnect the battery, and when you're checking, it will use the battery that's in the multimeter to check for ohms. Now let's discuss how we do the diode check or using the continuity beeper on your multimeter. As you can see from the picture, the symbol for doing your diode check will be a straight line with an arrow and a line across the top of the arrow. Or you can also have the symbol where it looks like sound is actually coming out of the multimeter. Once we're in this mode, we'll use this to check for diodes. Or we can measure the continuity of the circuit. When you're checking for continuity, listen to your meter. If it has a good continuity or a good circuit, it will actually beep to you. The The definition of continuity is an uninterrupted connection. When checking continuity, you may get a point OL. This indicates an open loop, which means no continuity. The period before the OL determines that this is an open loop. In this slide, we show you an example of your DVOM amps lead hookup. You have to move the red lead to the 10 amp on your multimeter. Make sure you switch it back when you are done. Now, using your multimeter, we'll go over the setting AC amps. AC amps symbol is the letter A with the squiggly line across the top. We use this setting to measure the current flow through the circuit, and this setting is usually used to measure household amps. And now let's go over the setting DC amps. In this setting, we can measure the current flow through the circuit. The symbol on your multimeter would be the letter A with the straight line and the dotted line over it. DC amps is what we would use to measure amps on the coach. Your digital voltage ohmmeter amperage test. For your digital meter, it has fuse protection. It gets hooked in series with the circuit. The function selector adjusts to the most accurate range. Has maximum amperage of the meter. And also double check your connections before you do the test. Check your setup. You don't want to damage your multimeter. In this slide, we show you an example of how you would hook your multimeter up when you're actually checking for amperage. You want to make sure you are hooked in series with the component you are checking. Now let's go ahead and discuss auto ranging. When auto ranging is on, the meter tries to find the best range. It starts in the lowest range and adjusts up to find the best reading. In this picture, we show you an example of your multimeter in auto range. Look at the top left corner of the Fluke 87 meter and it will actually tell you auto when it's in auto range. Now let's talk about manual ranging. In manual ranging, you choose the scale you are on. You start at the high end and go down until you get to an overload reading and then go up one. Depending where you have your meter set, it will round off your readings. For example, reading the voltage on a battery, if I was on the 1000 volt setting, I would get a reading of about 13 volts. If I was on the 200 volt setting, I could get a reading of 12.6 volts. And on the 20 volt setting, I'd get more of an accurate reading at 12.65 volts. If I was too low, for example, on the 2 volt setting, I would get an overload condition. So this is just an example so you can see the differences on the ranges. This can make your reading somewhat inaccurate if you are on the wrong range. An example of an overload indication or out of range indication if the resistance is higher than the scale you are on, certain multimeters may give you different readings. For instance, you may get OL, ouch, a blinking 3, or a blinking 1. And this is going to conclude our training on multimeters. We covered different functions of a multimeter. Different meters will have different ranges. Make sure you get to know the multimeter you are using. And don't let your multimeter get damaged. This could happen for not knowing how to use a multimeter or actually using it incorrectly. And this is going to conclude our training. For questions regarding this webcast, please contact ABC's Technical Service Department at 877-427-7278. Listen for the prompts for coach technical support and select the appropriate option. Support is available at this number 24/7.